Hello, hello. Good morning on New Year's Eve here in 2024. I am Manila Chan. That over there is Ted Rawl. You are tuned into the Ted Manila Information Show, also just TMI for short, where we bring you too much information. Anything from news, politics, lifestyle, culture, fad diets, because there are so many of them.
Are there?
Yeah, I mean, like this whole fucking Mounjaro or
Well, that's not a
Ozempic.
diet. That's just a drug
Well,
that makes you
it
not
is,
want to
but that's
eat.
like their new diet is not eating by way of injecting some junk into you. So we'll talk about stuff like that too,
We
medical
should
stuff.
totally talk about that shit.
Yeah, I don't. Well, Elon Musk is on it.
Yeah.
Like he showed a picture from like Christmas where he's like skinny Santa, so he was
he's
like
live.
showing off. Yeah, so we'll talk about all that stuff on this show. Anything and everything goes because we believe you can never have too much information. So if you are looking for that straight-laced, button-down news program, as you probably just heard a moment ago, I think I dropped an F-bomb. I can't even be sure because it just flies out of my mouth.
Well, if you did,
really, okay.
It doesn't mean it didn't happen. I'm not the most attentive co-host in the world, but
this program is not going to be for you. We are not safe for work. So if you are tuning in and you want to
work at like a gross place, like if you work for like some scoundrel, then it's fine, you know.
Like if you work in media, it's totally fine.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, if you work in media,
scum.
No, we're all scummy people. It's totally fine. But if you work anyplace else, just a word of warning: we do allow cursing on this program, so please be sure to keep the volume down. We talk about all the stuff that you want to hear about, like all the top news stories that you want more details on, in a more colorful manner, right, Tad? More colorful is the way we do the news.
True.
And then we do some stuff that you didn't even know that you needed to know. We talk about that stuff here on this show. We are live Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern. So please be sure to like and follow this show, whatever platform you're consuming the show on. If you are on YouTube, please do hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps us work towards moving towards monetization where we hit these
our numbers have kind of stalled, so we need some
help.
We need some help, yeah.
We need some help to continue growing because the clicks are there, but the subscribes, the follows are not in line. So please, it doesn't hurt you to hit subscribe. It'll help.
Yeah, you never have to watch the show ever. No one will come to your home. No one will.
You can ignore your
subscription. We won't call you. We won't add you to like one of those like Kamala Harris begging emails. Like, I know, like my favorite subject line from those is, "Can we talk?" It's like, no, we're past that.
I don't want to talk to you.
Not anymore. I don't know how much I ever wanted to talk to you, but not now.
Ted and I will not do that. You can totally ignore us after you hit subscribe. But if you're watching at all on a video clip, for example, just hit that sub button if you're on YouTube. It really doesn't hurt you, but it helps us tremendously. So please do consider doing that. And of course, our regular subscribers on Rumble, thank you so much for your support. If you are watching on Rumble and watching on the desktop platform, under the chat, there's a white subscribe button. I wish it wasn't white because maybe more people would see it and be able to click it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I have trouble finding it. It's not like
because it's like the way they designed it is
Rumble
terrible.
Rumble's like good on the free speech side, but weak on the design side.
Yeah, the design is not great, but the content and what you can see on Rumble, pretty awesome. And I think personally, it's great that they are really growing as a platform. But yeah, their design stuff, not so great. They have it's a white button. It's currently surrounded by a red line that says subscribe. And there you can become a $5 monthly subscriber if you are in the financial position. So you can help Ted and I.
Is it only $5? Is it not possible for people to give more?
I've not seen more. I think the default is $5. So I don't know if
maybe there's other options.
I'm not sure, but that's where you can become a paid subscriber. Of course, you don't have to. You can always just smash that thumbs up button on the screen to help the channel grow and follow us. Subscribe here.
Mm-hmm.
follow us so that way, again.
And don't forget, we're also on audio only. You don't have to see us. I mean, a lot of people I would rather not see me. So
that's
I
true.
get it if you don't want to see me. So, I mean,
I always forget about that. We do have the RSS feed, the audio feeds.
Yeah,
audio
so everywhere where podcasts are sold, Pandora, Spotify, blah, blah, blah. Just Apple Music, Google Play. Just go and check that out. I'm an audio man myself when it comes to podcasts. So I never watch the video. But
I do. Yeah, I do a lot of listening too because I need to be mobile and
it's
moving
great.
around.
Like, yeah, you're driving in the car. You're like,
yeah,
cleaning the house. I'm a big house cleaner while listening kind of person.
Yeah,
my house should be cleaner considering that.
Doing everything.
It's not as clean as it should be.
That means you're not listening to enough podcasts.
That's the problem. Yeah,
that's what that means. All right, so if you are there, thank you for all those who are our regulars. Shout out to them every morning because we chat with you live on both platforms, YouTube and Rumble. So you can get our attention there if you have questions for guests or whatever. Get into the chat. Make it hot. Make it spicy. Make it live. With that, let's hop into the headlines. Here come the jaws.
The deadliest air accident ever in the nation of South Korea has killed 179 people as of yesterday, when an airliner belly landed and then skidded off the end of the runway, erupting in a fireball as it slammed into a wall at Muan International Airport. Jeju Air Flight 7C 2216, arriving from Bangkok with 175 people and 6 crew aboard, was trying to land, not to imply that the passengers and the crew were not people there, you know what I'm saying, was trying to land shortly after 9 o'clock in the morning at the airport in the south of the country. That, according to the transport ministry there in South Korea. The twin-engine Boeing 737-800, not to be confused with the MAX, was seen in local media video skidding down the runway with no visible landing gear before crashing into navigation equipment and a wall in an explosion of flames and debris. 2 crew members who survived, a man and a woman, were rescued from the tail section of the burning plane. They were being treated at hospitals with medium to severe injuries. That, according to the local public health center. Investigators are examining the possibilities of bird strikes as well as weather conditions. Yonhap news agency in South Korea cited airport authorities as saying that such a bird strike may have caused the landing gear not to work. The accident happened only 3 weeks after Jeju Air began regular flights from Muan to Bangkok and other Asian cities on December 8th. Muan International is one of South Korea's smaller airports, but it has become a lot busier in recent years. All domestic and international flights at the airport have been canceled as of now, that according to Yonhap. That is a terrible tragedy, obviously. I'm always reminded of the history of Korean crashes.
There was something
similar in Guam, right? Probably about 20 years ago, where a plane bound landing a Korean Air flight from Guam. Landed at Guam, but then went off the runway into the ocean. And a number of people died there. And of course, Korean Flight 007, which was shot down by the Soviets in 1983. Also, so there's been a history of mishaps. When the Guam plane happened, I was actually riding on Asiana Air, which is a private, not flagship carrier of South Korea. It's a competitor to KAL. And when they showed the news on the screen, the Asiana had quite cleverly was running the scroll, the chyron, repeatedly with showing the picture of the burning wreckage from Korean Airlines and the logo of on the wing, like on fire. Oh. And it kept saying, pilot error, pilot error, pilot error. It's like the message couldn't be clearer.
Right. They just over and over repeating. Well, you know what, Ted, if you guys were listening on Friday, I would say Ted and I are somewhat cosmically at fault for this.
We are. It's true.
Because literally,
we may be witches. I mean, I would be a warlock and you would be a witch. But
that's true. Ted, I know that there are like hundreds and hundreds and thousands of podcasts and streams going on every day on all these platforms, right? And I can almost guarantee that we were the only show that talked about the bad history of Korean airlines, various airlines.
That's true, because nothing had happened.
Falling out of the sky. Yeah, there was nothing.
Yeah, we just brought that up. So we made that happen. The bird, we were the bird. The TMI show is the bird.
I don't even know what to say. Like, when this happened, I was like, no way. Ted and I were literally just talking about like how like there was so much malfeasance and like cultural things that happened in the 80s and 90s with all these different Korean airliners, and how they came crashing down or falling out of the sky, literally just falling out of the sky, because it's discussed in this Malcolm Gladwell book called Outliers. And that, you know, ever since then, they seem to have straightened out. And then this happens yesterday, which is so awful. I mean, look at this video that's on the screen right now. Ted, how do you explain? I mean, so the engine sucks in a couple geese or whatever up there, right?
Not the engine. But then, if it's the landing gear, it would have been like. But then the landing gear. The landing gear didn't come out. Starts to deploy, right? Like it opens up. That little, there's a hatch in there. It opens up. Landing gear starts to come out. The goose or whatever gets hit by jams the landing gear, so that when the plane lands, the nose comes down, and then starts scraping, and then that's how.
But like then the second part of my questions here is like, okay, the jet, a whole ass jet, crashes into what we can only presume are like concrete barriers like you see on the freeway, you know, or like for riot scenes or prevent riots or whatever. There are these concrete barriers, right? Because from what I'm looking at in the video, maybe it's a cinder block wall. Let's say it's a wall, you know, with rebar drilled into the ground, or, you know, poured into the ground, right? With poured concrete. You're telling me a whole ass jet can't withstand crashing into a freaking cinder block wall? Cinder block can be broken. If you pick up cinder block and just slam it hard enough on the ground, it can break. How does a whole ass jet land skidding on the runway going 70 miles an hour not just break through some concrete wall? Mind you, this is a Boeing jet.
Wait, are you basically a Jeju truther? Is what you're doing here?
I don't get how a whole ass jet doesn't break a concrete or cinder block wall.
Let me answer that question. Okay, so first of all, like I said, the wall may have had nothing to do with it, right? Correlation does not equal causation. The plane might have caught fire and burned without there be lots. This has happened without hitting anything, right? I mean, it's landing on its belly. There's landing gear for a reason. It's not supposed to do that, right? So
no, I get it.
Okay, so that might be the end of it. Also, in terms of like the wall, you know, people ask this question, of course, about the World Trade Center flights, and you know, like same sort of thing. And it was like, well, people think of planes as like solid, but they're not. They're made as light as possible. You know, they need to fly, right? So it's a thin skin of the plane, you know, and it's like and so obviously a plane coming in hot at like 120 miles per hour hits a retaining wall. It's made of cinder block. There's going to be some damage. I mean, planes have burned.
This, though, I mean, look at it.
Look, it was in some Caribbean nation, and I believe in the 80s, when two planes sort of basically collided on the runway, and hundreds of people died. The planes caught fire. I mean, it was like, and they weren't, you know what I mean? They weren't going very fast. They were basically like just, you know, taxiing on, you know, so that can happen. Why couldn't this happen? I mean, my question would be more like, why do you have a fucking wall like that at the end of a runway? You know, I mean,
at the end of a runway, yes.
Probably not a smart idea. Like at LaGuardia, which is a small airport in New York, relatively. There's a fence. There's a regular chain link fence. I don't think that would do a lot of damage to a plane. If a plane overshot
Right.
at all.
Maybe they should
I
just
was on
put
a
up
plane
like
that overshot in
Ted. They
Paris,
should just put up
and
one
it
of
just
those
rolled
big
into
nets,
the field.
like for golfing. You know, you should put up one of
Well,
to
or
catch
aircraft,
the
or
plane.
an aircraft carrier, right? They have those things that catch the plane.
What? I don't know anything about that.
No, you know when a plane lands on an aircraft carrier, and especially
When
if
it lands on the carrier. Okay. Oh,
you've seen Top Gun. It's like that, right? The plane is caught sometimes by a net, or they have a device that basically it catches it.
Yeah, like so. Why do you have literally? It's like a blunt stop at the end of this runway.
A lot of airports.
So many questions.
A lot of airports are not very well designed, and I mean, look, the
So many
implication here is this used to be a small regional airport, and over recent years, it's become sort of more of a hub, and therefore, it probably hasn't really been adapted in time for its for the volume that's there.
And I think worth noting is Boeing's immediate response was, "This was not a MAX jet. We had nothing to do with this, and the engines were made by company A and company B. That's a French company. If it sucked in some geese, it ain't us."
I don't think it had anything. I think even if it sucked in some geese, it went into the landing gear. I mean, if it went into the engine, that just wouldn't have happened that way. Anyway, the landing gear is obviously the problem here.
I heard some aviation experts already saying, well, for example, when you look at the video, why were its flaps on the wings not down? So
that's a good question.
I'm not an expert, but look, the flaps are not there. The flaps are not down.
Well, that could have been pilot error. I mean, it's entirely possible that the pilots also panicking over the situation that was unfolding very quickly they forgot to put the flaps down, right?
That's I don't know. Well, and that goes back to our conversation that we were having on Friday about the pilot error and pilot the senior pilot, which is called the left pilot.
There's also not enough people in the fucking cockpit anymore. Now it's
I don't know.
There's a lot of planes where there's only two, a pilot and a co-pilot. In many cases, not during takeoff and landing, but in many cases, there's only one person actually in the cockpit at any given time. The other person's taking a nap or whatever. They go. They're hanging.
Yeah, and there's nobody dissenting or kind of.
If you look at pictures of cockpits from like the 1950s and 60s, there'd be 4 or 5 people in there. All of whom could fly the plane. So if someone had a heart attack, no big deal. Person number 2 has a heart attack, no big deal. You had a navigator. You had a radio person who was separate, but they were all completely qualified pilots, and they rotate and they could all do it. We don't have enough personnel running things anymore.
Yeah. Well, a lot of questions surrounding this thing. And look, Ted, if you look closely right here, towards the bottom of the video where the plane is, are those fucking geese sitting right there laughing?
Well, they might be crying because they'd be like, Joey.
That could be true. Are those geese or some kind of big bird? Big birds.
I don't know if Korea has geese. Maybe they do. I don't know if geese are ubiquitous. I don't know.
Really? I don't know.
I mean, I've been to many parts of the world where I didn't see any geese. For example, in Cancun.
No, I think they are. There's got to be, because the Chinese have ducks, because we do
Peking.
Duck is a big thing.
Yeah, but duck and geese are not the same.
I know. I think sister geese would be there. Would make sense.
Just because we have ducks and geese doesn't mean that other countries that have ducks also have geese.
I don't know. I think
correlation does not
pretty
Yeah,
ubiquitous.
poultry correlation does not equal poultry
ducks
causation.
For sure are all across I would say, if not all of Asia, for sure ducks are all over Asia. So I would venture to say
I think ducks are more common than geese. I think
so geese,
as a rule, I think there's more species of them. I think they're more widespread. We'd have to get an ornithologist.
We'd have to look into that. Okay, I don't know, but yeah, this is horrible tragedy and so many questions. And for once,
maybe by the way,
I'm not going to blame Boeing.
Maybe we shouldn't really have airports and geese in the same places.
How do you control that? I don't know. For once, though, I'm not blaming Boeing. So there's that.
Okay, well, for now, we'll find out it's their fault.
Well, maybe.
All right.
Maybe.
Anyway, Russia says it no longer considers itself bound by its unilateral moratorium on the deployment of intermediate and short-range nuclear-capable missiles that clears the way for Moscow to deploy those weapons across Europe and Asia. Russia had voluntarily imposed its moratorium on itself following the American withdrawal from the two countries' Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019. That happened under Trump over alleged Russian breaches and concerns about missile capabilities by China. The Russians had signaled the move in October when they refused to commit to extend what they called New START, which was scheduled to expire in February of 2026. Sergei Lavrov, foreign minister, repeated that there were currently no conditions for a strategic dialogue with the U.S. Russia had already suspended its participation in New START a year ago over U.S. aid to Ukraine, and in November of this year fired an intermediate-range hypersonic ballistic missile known as Oreshnik at the Ukrainian city of Dnipro in response to strikes on its own territory by Ukrainian forces with U.S. and British missiles, an act that President Putin had last week said that he would repeat if it happened again. With components of the Oreshnik allegedly reliant on Western technology, however, Russia faces potential hurdles in this latest chapter in the post-Cold War arms race. I don't know. It doesn't sound like, it's funny how the Russians could be, categorized as being evil here. They were being nice when they didn't have to, and they just stopped being nice. I don't know.
Gloves are off.
Well, I mean, it is a war. I mean, the Russians don't want to accelerate this, and we'll be talking about this later in the show. But they're winning in Ukraine, so they kind of don't really need to escalate.
They don't
matters.
need to do all. No, of course not. But this whole thing is they put an expiration date on how long they would have their moratorium, and now the gloves are off because Biden. You have to just remember was it Friday? Biden unleashed another gajillion dollars. While he was in St. Croix. He's vacationing in St. Croix, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
Vacationing from what? He's not doing anything.
Vacationing from senility in DC and taking it to St. Croix.
Where they need more senility. They have a shortage of senility.
Probably. So he's hanging out in St. Croix, and he offloaded another $1 billion or whatever it was to Ukraine, which, yes, we will be talking about later in the show. But this is the timing, right? So Biden does that on a Friday. Over there in Moscow, it's nighttime because I think they're plus 8 hours from Washington. So it's evening time over there. So the Duma probably talked about it and over the weekend and was like, yeah, you know what? Let's just take off that moratorium. And now we're untethered. We're unburdened by the past.
By the way, we have some breaking news about that Korean plane. Wall Street Journal is reporting that they have the audio of the flight of the cockpit voice recorder. The first words when the crisis began were "Mayday, bird strike."
Oh.
So that sort of probably answers the question. By the way, do you know why it's called Mayday? Why it's code? It's actually, I love this story. I just found this out pretty recently. Mayday, Mayday. It's from French. In French, you'd say "m'aider," "m'aider," or "aider." The verb aider in the infinitive tense is to help.
Aid,
M apostrophe means to me or to help me. So m'aider means help me in French. And I don't know exactly like how that ended up.
It became an adaptation.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
It is interesting. All right, I can't believe we
needed to hear that.
Almost did not talk about this today, but we are. Former President Jimmy Carter, a man who redefined what a post-presidency could be, died yesterday at the age of 100. His son Chip Carter confirmed that Carter had died at his home in Plains at about 3:45 in the afternoon. Carter, who lived longer than any other American president, entered hospice in Plains in February 23 after a series of short hospital stays. The only Georgian ever elected to the White House, Carter left office after a single term that was highlighted by forging peace between Israel and Egypt, but was then overshadowed by the Iran hostage crisis After he left the presidency, his reputation grew through he and his wife Rosalind's work at the Carter Center in Atlanta, and of course working for Habitat for Humanity. He was born James Earl Carter Jr. in Plains on October 1st, 1924, the first of 4 kids of Earl Carter, a farmer and businessman, and Lillian Gordy Carter, a registered nurse. People always think that he was a hick and small time, but he was, when they say he had a peanut farm, it was a big ass enterprise, right? He was a business person, and he inherited some money from his dad, right? He gained an appointment to the Naval Academy, graduated, joined the Navy submarine branch, but he's one of the, he graduated at the top of his class. He was a nuclear physicist. For
That's
7 years.
Impressive.
I think he's arguably one of the most intelligent and well-educated presidents we've ever had. Anyway, he was elected governor of Georgia in 1970. He served 1 term before running for president, winning the Democratic nomination, and then he started running, by the way, like 4 years before 1976. He and Rosalind were driving around in a beat-up station wagon all over the country, particularly in the South, on their own for 4 years, and it was kind of like, the opportunity that was created by the upheaval of Watergate and the Nixon resignation created that opening for him. He defeated Republican President Jerry Ford in November of '76. His successes included promoting human rights, although maybe not in the Philippines and maybe not in South Africa, maybe not that much in Israel, maybe not that much in Latin America. You get the idea. He added to the National Park and Preserve system, reestablished governmental credibility after the Watergate crisis and Camp David, which forged a peace agreement between Egypt and Israel, but didn't require Israel to, get the fuck out of the occupied territories. A problem that is with us today. They were overshadowed by trouble at home and abroad. At home, Carter and his advisors, most of them Washington outsiders, met resistance from his own party. Then, in November of '79, Iranian militants stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took hostages. This narrative omits what happened before that happened, which was Carter agreeing to allow the dictator, the Shah of Iran, into the United States for medical treatment, which really pissed off the Iranian students and caused the hostage crisis to happen. He tried negotiation, then tried a bold rescue mission that failed because of helicopter failure. Well, not really. It was a sandstorm. He could not resolve the situation until the last day of his administration. Meanwhile, back at home, a foundering economy exacerbated by oil embargoes by Middle Eastern countries and the rise of the GOP under Reagan led to his defeat in November of 1980. He returned to Plains and used the power of his ex-presidency to his last, and some would say his best act. He began volunteering for Habitat for Humanity, building houses for the poor. Then with Rosalind, he founded the Carter Center, which focused on making peace and spreading health and democracy around the world. He went after the guinea worm, which is a really particularly nasty, fucking gross-ass parasite that really fucks people up in Africa. It's almost gone. Because
I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's disgusting. It will carry the couple's humanitarian and democratic work forward. So I'm working on my column this week. It's going to be about criticizing Jimmy Carter's presidency from the left, something that nobody, I've read so many takes on this. Nobody talks about the fact that that we have draft registration because of him, or that he started the 1980s big ass defense buildup that caused this total militarism that we have now, or that he financed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, who then morphed into Al-Qaeda. They turned out to be problematic. We'd be better off today with a secular socialist Afghanistan where women wear miniskirts rather than burqas in Afghanistan. That's what we would have if we hadn't gone after the Soviet Union that way. And hell, the Soviet Union might still be here, which would also be, frankly, I would argue, would be better than what happened. I agree with Putin that was a collapse. That was a disaster for the world.
Sure. Because
the U.S. no longer had a counterbalance, and we went into this unipolar world. Carter was, I think, very problematic in many ways. He also is he's really like the first non-liberal Democratic president of the modern era. He didn't even propose a single anti-poverty program. He was the first Democratic president not to do that. And so, not that the economy was great. He boycotted the Moscow Olympics in 1980. That sucked too.
That was weird. Yeah.
That was wrong. He politicized the Olympics. So there's a lot to criticize.
Yeah, I'm not a Carter expert. I know more about his post presidency than I do his actual presidency. I know I know the basics and the broad strokes of what that presidency looked like. Of course, I was a mere infant in his final months of his presidency. Um, so my first real memories were of Ronald Reagan. But I know that was a huge departure. I mean, we got Ronald Reagan because of Jimmy Carter. That's the whole thing. But we got Jimmy Carter because of this post Nixon turned Ford presidency, right? It was a rejection of all of that because people viewed Nixon as this criminal and whatever, and that Ford was just, the leftovers, the remnants of that shady administration. So, I don't have personally a lot of gripes with him because I think his humanitarian side, I think, will be a lot more of his legacy, because I think he just seemed. I would say he's was the last U.S. president to go on to lead a somewhat normal life after leaving the Oval Office, and then not only was it somewhat normal, but it was outstanding in the fact that he was a humanitarian and did kind of, live by what he espouses, which was do good things, be Christian, and do all this stuff. He did a lot of he lived by his word, and so I would say that's mostly going to be his legacy, even though politically he was kind of. I think a lot of Georgians even said that. So I guess we should probably leave it there and move along.
We should. I'm just going to say one more thing that I read about today, and I thought this was interesting. Unlike Biden, he did accept and receive negative feedback about his presidency. Like Biden apparently was never told about the polls that showed he was likely to lose to Trump, but he was so insulated, his advisors wouldn't tell him. And Carter wasn't insulated like that. But at one point, someone told him, Mr. President, you're not leading the country, you're administering the government. And that's really interesting. I mean,
that's a burn. That's a burn.
Well, it's not I think the point is it was an accurate observation. And it's a reminder that leadership is, I mean, it's intangible, but it's like in a way, it's more, that's really what the president needs to do. And that's what didn't happen, by the way, under Biden. No one was leading the country. Nobody has been leading the country. I would argue
from one Georgia to another Georgia, Ted.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So now let's move on. Speaking of which, Georgia has now inaugurated President Mikhail Kavalashvili.
Kavalashvili.
Yes, great. That's what I said.
Kavalashvili.
Amid growing demonstrations and accusations of election fraud perpetuated by Russia. Kavalashvili, a former soccer player, was selected by a 300-member electoral college controlled by the ruling Georgian Dream Party, which now dominates every major government position. Kavalashvili, we'll just call him Big K. His appointment comes a month after the Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze announced a suspension of EU accession talks until 2028, a move welcomed by Russians, but not on the streets of Tbilisi. Thousands of Georgians demonstrated at the parliament building nightly since the country's elections in October, facing down riot cops, water cannons, and tear gas. Hundreds have been detained and over 100 injured. The opposition boycotted the election, and the previous president, pro-EU leader Salome Zurabishvili, we're going to have to, by the way, invade Georgia and force them all to have simpler names, has refused to step down despite being threatened with jail. While Zurabishvili has now vacated the presidential palace, she has not left quietly. Speaking on a podcast, she said, this election and hence the inauguration of the president is not valid, so I remain president and I continue to do my job.
Sense.
That is what everybody has to know. Meanwhile, Congressman Joe Wilson of the United States has invited Zurabishvili to attend Trump's inauguration, recognizing her as Georgia's only legitimate leader. Here comes trouble.
Here comes that's trouble. If you start hearing a U.S. lawmaker start saying, no, the newly democratically elected president is invalid. Gee, Ted, when was the last time we heard that coming out of Eastern Europe?
Well, there was that, and then there was Venezuela. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm talking specifically about Eastern Europe, and I mean, I'm sure our guest probably has some opinions about this, but I mean, this is exactly what happened when they said, when the U.S. when it was our government in the shape of Victoria Nuland that said, no, the Petro Poroshenko government they're valid, that the Yanukovych government is invalid. Here we are again, 10 years later. Now they're saying the same thing. They're saying the same thing in Georgia under a democratically elected process. They are not recognizing the soccer player guy that Mikhail, I guess we can call him President Mikhail.
This is a former Soviet republic. The United States, truly as a rule, should just not be involved in former Soviet republics. I mean, to use a Cold War term, that's in Russia's sphere of influence. Yeah. They're gonna take it personally. They're gonna view it as us fucking with them, and so we should just stay out of it.
Leave these people alone.
Homelessness in the United States has reached the highest level ever this year since the federal government began keeping records about 20 years ago. Nearly 772,000 people are now considered homeless in a single night in January. That's up a whopping 18% from last year, according to federally required tallies. Those requirements are relatively new. These to be just estimates taken across the country. The new data attributes the rise to various factors: high rents, the end of pandemic era protections, and of course the migrant flow that has overwhelmed shelters in cities like here in New York City, Chicago, and Denver. However, since the tallies, migrant border crossings have dropped a lot because Biden reclosed the border. Other data points include family homelessness increasing by 39%. 150,000 children are among the homeless. That's a 33% increase from 2023. Meanwhile, vets homelessness is down a little bit, 8% to roughly 32,000. Dallas, which made plans in 2021 to overhaul its homelessness response system, they have the housing first approach, which is basically you don't set up any kind of preconditions. You just find a homeless person. Doesn't matter if they're an alcoholic or whatever. You just give them a house. They saw a 16% drop in homelessness between 2022 and 2024, and also they had gains earlier than that. So they're very impressive. In LA, which increased housing for the homeless, the rate has dropped 5% over last year. So we've got a lot of homeless people in this country.
Yeah. And there's this is a subject, this is like a show in and of itself, Ted, which we can't even get into, but this, I mean, I have a family member who had experienced this for roughly 10 years, and thankfully he's off the streets now and he's gotten his life back together. And it is a hard process, and I could go into detail about me hand holding him and walking him through trying to get back into normal life. But that's a whole different conversation. This is me doing this as an individual, what the government can do to make the process easier to help these people get off the street, which the government does not do. So there are a lot of deficits and shortfalls that the government has in addressing homelessness. But again, that's a whole different conversation, and it's terrible that homelessness has risen basically 20% in this year alone. Awful, terrible way to end the year and end the Biden administration. And I would say it's extremely shameful. Biden should be completely ashamed.
Agreed. All right. So with that, we should can bring in our guest, and you and I both have doctors to see. So
yes, exactly. Yes, we got to do this. We got about 20 minutes. I got a tooth to fix, and Ted's got a wrist to fix. Right. So with that, let's switch gears and get into our main topic. All right. So joining us to discuss our main topic, of course, which is the hopes for Ukraine, an upcoming 2025 under a Trump presidency. What's this going to look like there across the country? And what do the Ukrainians hope for? So who better to ask than an actual Ukrainian, Ted?
Imagine.
Imagine an actual Ukrainian. Let's bring in an actual Ukrainian to discuss. Hi, Andy. That is Andrei Telezhenko. He's a former Ukrainian diplomat turned whistleblower, and he has been kind of excommunicated from the country because, if some people may or may not recognize his face or maybe his name, his story, he's basically excommunicated from the country because he refused to work for the corrupt Zelensky regime. And they basically put him on the now infamous Zelensky kill list, along with Tulsi Gabbard and other people like that. So he is in an undisclosed European location, but he is brave enough to join us. So Andy, always appreciate when you make some time for us. So let's start there. We are at the end of 2024. We are just a few weeks away from Donald Trump taking office. He, in his normal fashion, says stuff like, "Oh, I'm going to end the war in 24 hours or whatever." I mean, I don't think anyone actually believes that's going to happen because that's not very realistic. But Vladimir Putin has also signaled, and not even through back channels, right? He has said it publicly during his annual end of year press conference that he does, every year for hours and hours. Vladimir Putin says, the ball is basically in Donald Trump's court because the U.S. cut off all diplomatic ties with Moscow. So if Donald Trump reaches out to me, then yes, I'll talk peace with him. When you're a Ukrainian, you have family there, you have friends there still. When you hear that, does that give you hope, or how do you translate that when you hear it?
Hi, Manila. Hi, Ted. Hi, viewers. I'm glad to be back on your show. It's
great to have you.
A lot of stuff happening throughout this year. And just before I answer your question about Trump, just getting back into Georgia and what some U.S. lawmakers are saying, I overheard your conversation. I can just add about the Georgian elections. The margin of differences between the opposition, which lost the so-called race into Georgia to the parliament, is 43% difference, 53 to 11. So there's no way you can talk about falsification of elections, not 2 or 3%. And there's not millions and hundreds of thousands. There's a couple of thousand people going on the streets who are on a payroll from the Western NGOs who understand that their payroll is going to end soon because Georgia has a law of FARA in act. Now they're going to control everybody who is going to invest money into political games there. So that's why they're fighting for their last breath. And that's why some American law officials are stating about that. And I'd rather have those American law officials get back to America and look what's happening with the people on the streets and get them to work than rather looking into post-Soviet countries like Georgia and Ukraine. So that's just something to add to your conversation there for the viewers to understand that it's not some corrupt Georgian, it's Russian sphere. It's people in Georgia spoken out. There's a 43% difference, 11 to 53% margin. That's the difference between the opposition and the government that won and stayed in power today. And getting back to your question,
huge margin of victory, huge.
It is. So there's democracy there, no doubt, no word about it, no doubt. So we have to just turn the page over and let the West forget about Georgia and let the West deal with Georgia in a diplomatic way, not to tell anybody what to do or tell Ukraine what to do. So here we have Ukraine, where we have the war in the third-year phase, thanks to the West, which had a coup in Ukraine in 2014, brought in also illegitimate government, which they then said it's legitimate, and started making anti-Russia out of Ukraine. And today we have over 1 million people dead from the Ukrainian army, mostly military-wise, and hundreds of thousands from the Russian side. So a lot of people dead. The war is still continuing. Nobody's talking about peace except just political slogans. And we had Russia over the last 10 years agreeing to have the Minsk Accords in act, which Ukraine signed, Poroshenko signed, and Ukraine could have had Donbas back as an autonomy, and that would be no problem. But basically, it would be our territory. We would have stop the civil war at that time, and there would be this bloodshed today. But no, the Ukrainian government under American control and London control pushed this war further, didn't agree to the Minsk Accords. Russia again asked in December 2021 let's sign the NATO agreements. Let's rethink about the NATO agreements and think about Ukraine not joining NATO. The West said no. Ukraine is going to join into NATO, even though Ukraine is not in NATO. Nobody's letting Ukraine into NATO. So they're using Ukraine as a bait to continue this war and basically feeding Ukrainians lies. And then we had the Istanbul Accords, which also peace talks, which Ukraine also signed, and did not. Russia pulled out its army out of Kiev, and nobody basically went and worked on them. We could have stopped the war in 2022. So today, 2024, 2025 coming in, a new administration in Washington, which promised, and that's why I think Trump did win a lot, because the people want peace in the world, not only in America, but around the world. And Americans, first of all, want their country to stop financing this bloodshed in Eastern Europe. And Trump should stay to his word. He needs to understand. He needs to build the right team around himself, not some people who hate Russia, Russophobes, or anybody like that. He needs to have a diplomatic corps around him, diplomats who can advise him on how to end it, because America is losing from this. America's economy is losing from this dramatically. Russia's economy is growing. Europe is destroyed.
Yeah.
German economy is growing 0%. 0% growth of German economy. One of the largest economies in the world has zero growth, and a lot of companies are just falling apart. Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW are moving to China, moving to the United States. America is happy with this, of course, because they need this to happen. But what Trump needs to do, first of all, before he even makes a phone call to Putin, if he is really serious to stop this war, he needs to get all these 16 intel agencies out of Ukraine, CIA, NSA, all of them. They're all there in Kiev. All of them are coordinating this war. Get them out of Ukraine. Get the foreign legionnaires who are fighting for the Ukrainian army out of them. There's more than 40,000 foreigners fighting for the Ukrainian army, and more than 15,000 of them are Americans, American citizens fighting on Ukrainian soil. Get them out of Ukraine, leave the embassy there, U.S. embassy, and then start peace negotiations. Then there will be no sabotage from the deep state within this process, and then he will show that and let Ukraine be more free in its process making, and because a lot of Ukrainians will oust Zelensky out. And this will make the start negotiations process with Moscow much easier. And I think that's what should be the first step. And I've been talking about this for over a year. And Colonel Douglas Macgregor actually supported my words a couple of weeks ago and said the same thing, that Trump needs to do this.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you've thought about this a lot, obviously, because you're invested, right? Like, I mean, you're not only a Ukrainian national, but like I said, you still have very many friends and family still there. If they've managed to, escape being kidnapped to go to the front line by Zelensky. But when you do communicate with your friends back home, do they have much hope in Donald Trump? Do they have hope that Zelensky will finally step down? Because I mean, he's out basically said, I'm going to be president, into perpetuity because there's no elections. So is there any talk about that? Do they have hope that something will change?
Yeah, Zelensky, starting May 20th, 2024, is not a legitimate president by the Constitution of Ukraine. That's it, period. It's not Russian propaganda, it's the law, Ukrainian law.
He claims that he declared martial law, right? So therefore, under martial law, there can't be an election. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
By the martial law, only the parliament can prolong its term, but it has to prolong it with an act within the parliament and a vote. By the Constitution of Ukraine, Article 110, the president cannot prolong his stay in power more than 4 years. So it is written in the Constitution, which was thrown away in Ukraine because the Constitution of Ukraine also protects, Article 10 of the Constitution of Ukraine protects the Russian language in Ukraine, which is also being destroyed today. So it protects religious freedoms, especially right now with the closing of the churches and the Kiev regime taking over the churches of the Ukrainian Patriarch Church to basically destroy our religion. So they just threw away the Constitution. America is closing its eyes on this, and that's it. So I don't know what Trump is going to do, but he should not talk to Zelensky. He's not a legitimate president. He should just give him an order to get out of Ukraine also, because he's one of those puppets who agreed to fight this war. He knew that this war is going to happen. I'm talking about Zelensky, and he's fighting it. today destroying Ukraine, even though a lot of Ukrainians want it to stop. And what you're asking is, do Ukrainians want to stop this war? Yes. Do Ukrainians have hope on Trump? Yes, they do. They saw that there's some blink of light in this dark, dark world that can at least talking about peace from the West, from across the ocean, the people who are able to stop it, who are able to stop the financing of this regime, financing of this war, can just do it like this really fast. I said, get out of all those intel agencies, get those legionnaires out of Ukraine, stop financing the Kyiv regime, and let the Ukrainians decide what they really want. And then we will see what government will come to power. We will see, will there be elections? We will see a different change, and Ukraine starting to go to the path of peace. Because today's Kyiv illegitimate regime under Zelensky is talking about war. We see anybody who's talking about peace in Eastern Europe, Orban, Fico, Zelensky is attacking them. They're going after any of those people who go to Russia to talk about peace. What is this? What world are we living in that a legitimate president is basically threatening the Western world to go anybody who's talking about peace? Because this is what he did to Ukraine. I was one of those people who had to flee Ukraine and was put on a kill list because I was talking about peace the last 4-5 years. Even before this war started, I begged on every TV station that I was on not to start this war because Ukraine is going to lose. Ukraine lost already. I can tell you that it lost because the war already started. Ukraine doesn't have it has an army only of people. Basically, I'm sorry to say, it's meat, which is being thrown to the front lines and being used to stay in power for one more day, one more night, for Zelensky to make more money and make more money for his owners in Washington. That is the biggest problem today, which has to end. And Trump and his surrounding needs to understand this. That he can negotiate. I know he's going to negotiate from the American side. He's going to try to get something out of this for the United States. But the longer he negotiates this process, the more people are going to die in Ukraine. And mostly those are going to be Ukrainian military, which don't want to fight also. The people who are being thrown today on the front lines, they don't want to fight. They're plumbers, they're beekeepers, they're farmers. They're being just taken out of the street without any training, sent to the front lines without any equipment, not even getting paid. The soldiers who fought, that started to fight this war at the beginning, they're all dead. The ones who will be trained by NATO for the last 8-10 years, starting from 2014, they're all dead. So can you imagine the trained soldiers for 8 years are dead? What's going to happen to the plumber without no training, without any equipment, sent to the front lines? Ukraine doesn't have satellites. Ukraine doesn't have ballistics. Ukraine doesn't have submarines. Ukraine doesn't have a fleet. It has the only army it has used old weapons from the West. Men on the ground in Ukraine, which are now the Zelensky regime is trying to lower the age of the military from 25 to 18, and now they're not even letting out the 16 years old out of the country, so they will be basically thrown to the front lines. This is what Hitler Germany did in 1945 before its collapse, sending Hitler Jugend, the youngsters from 13 to 18 years old to fight against the Red Army, which was going into Berlin, and they lost because those kids could not fight. This is what's happening in Ukraine, and this is unfortunately being supported by the warmongers in Washington and people like that who are trying to intervene in the post-Soviet countries. Because Soviet Union, they have to understand, made a move once in 1989. Remember the fall of the Berlin Wall? That was the move from the Soviet Union to get its soldiers out of Eastern Berlin, Eastern Germany, unite Germany, and that was the biggest basically move in the 20th century of peace. And the agreement was that the West would not, and NATO would not move an inch into the eastward. But they did not fulfill the promise. The United States moved eastward, NATO moved eastward, and now it's on the Russian borders. And they made my country not a prosperous country the last 10 years, but they made it anti-Russia, a hatred country, a terrorist country, which is now being used to make terrorist acts against Russians and any other ones. Any other one in the world, they're working their way around in Syria and Africa just to make more money for its own regime, and this is what Ukraine has become.
Let me ask you. I mean, like, a lot of listeners here in the United States have been told and taught that that the war in Ukraine was completely Russia's fault, that it's a land grab, that President Putin is bloodthirsty. That he's trying to put the Soviet Union back together. that that Ukraine, when any suggestion that Ukraine did anything to provoke it is wrong, and it's pro-Russia, and it's unfair to the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are innocent victims in all this. Zelensky is a noble person. What do you say to them?
I'm sorry.
You know that's the mainstream view here.
I know what the mainstream view. Yeah, it's just terrible. Problem is, I just gave you an example. The uniting of Germany, the fall of the Berlin Wall, was the agreement from the Soviet Union and Russia. Let the soldiers out. The Americans didn't leave Germany. They still have their military bases in Western Germany. Nobody talking about that. Russia, the Soviet Union left 400,000 army, left Germany and united it. And the agreement was not to have NATO move eastward. The NATO continued to move eastward for the last 30 years. And Ukraine, after its coup in 2013-14, I was in the government. I was the advisor to the first deputy prime minister of Ukraine, overseeing Ukraine intel and military and law enforcement. I remember those days when the head of the CIA came to Ukraine and gave an order to basically destroy Donbas, to shell Donbas with artillery. People in Donbas did not have an army. People in Donbas were, they were supported from different groups, but they did not have an army, didn't have artillery, didn't have aviation, but they were shelled by the Kiev regime for more than 8 years, and more than 15,000 civilians were killed during that period of time. And nobody talked about that at all. So Ukraine moved against its own people. Ukraine started this war, the Kiev government, not the Ukrainians, but the Kiev government. And then in that 10 years time frame, since 2014 until today, they were building propaganda to hate Russia within Ukraine, to hate anything Russian, anything Soviet, that Ukraine didn't have any connection to the Soviet Union at all, even though our history is a 70-year history within the Soviet Union, and Ukrainians, we were part of the Soviet Union for 70 years. And before that, we were part of the Russian Empire for more than 400 years. And before that, the Kiev Rus, Russia and Ukraine came, basically today's Russia and Ukraine came from the Kiev Rus thousands of years ago, and we had our own church, which is also being destroyed today by the West. Right. So who's destroying what today? The West is destroying Ukraine and moving Ukraine to fight. If they wanted Ukraine, if they were loving Ukraine so much in the West, they would stop this war, understanding that Ukraine could not win a nuclear nation like Russia. They wanted to topple the regime in Russia. We were talking about Carter and Reagan before this. During Reagan time, Brzezinski wrote an article for Reagan talking about how to destroy Russia from within. Two Slavic countries fighting and spilling blood between each other, they thought would topple Russia and destroy it into 50 pieces. That's what their plan was with this war. They wanted to topple the government in Russia at the beginning of this war, and that's why this war even started, because that's what the agenda was in Washington, to take the Russian resources and the Ukrainian resources. $75 trillion of resources. And
that's why the Donbas has been attacked for the last 10 years, right?
Yes, it was. That's why they gave away the Obama administration. I was there when they said, we don't care about Crimea. That's why there was no blood spilled in Crimea. The people went out in Crimea and also didn't want to be with the illegitimate Kiev government. And they said the word in the referendum, and they went away peacefully. There was no blood spill. But for Donbas, the head of the CIA, Brennan, and I gave an article to Aaron Mate, which this year, which I'm quoted in, and he talks about this in depth, how the director of CIA, Brennan, came to Ukraine, and 3 days before the anti-terrorist operation in Donbas, he gave an order to shell Donbas and not give it away to the Russians. That's what was Washington's fighting for, resources, and that's why today we see the outcome from Washington and the new administration to take over Greenland, Canada, because that's where the future resource. It's funny today, but we may see the world change in the next 10, 15 years. America is fighting for resources around the globe today because $75 trillion worth of resources in Russia, more than $10 trillion worth of resources in Eastern Ukraine, and they need that. But if they cannot have it, they need something else, because dollar is on the verge of bankruptcy. $36 trillion worth of debt. Where it's going to go? It's going to all fall apart one day. That's where it's going into Bitcoin, because the paper money. Yeah, I don't want to be conspiracy theory, but this is my analytics, and I think that's what's going to happen.
Agree with you. because it's downward trending, especially with BRICS, and they're working on their own currency and all of that. So I see your point. At first I laughed because I'm like, oh yeah, Trump talking about wanting to buy Greenland, or it sounds crazy because it comes from Trump, and the way he says it doesn't give it much credibility. Or saying, let's absorb Canada, or what he says.
Every time the United States has expanded in the past, even in the 19th century, the presidents and the senators who brought it up were always laughed at, right? I mean, Senator Seward, it was called, the purchase of Alaska from Russia was called Seward's Folly. People in Congress thought the Louisiana Purchase was insane. The Gadsden Purchase was considered to be insane. Going to war with Mexico over Texas was considered insane. So it's always considered insane, and then until they do it.
Until it happens. Well, fair enough. Last thing I want to throw at you, Andy, before we let you go, is you and I were chuckling about this, was that because for us in the States, December 25th is Christmas. And Joe Biden obviously was condemning the onslaught in Ukraine on December 25th and called it, this Christmas massacre and whatever. Can you please tell the world, the viewers, what December 25th is for Ukrainian Orthodox people? Because I think the majority of Ukrainians are Orthodox, right?
Yeah. The Catholic world celebrates Christmas on the 25th, and it's a great holiday, and Christmas has always been a sacred place for everybody. But the problem is with Ukraine, as again, with the West get involved, they formed this fake church, the PTSU, the OCU, and I call it a fake church. I call them Satanists that are around, because they're taking over our churches, our Orthodox churches of Ukraine Orthodox Church in Ukraine, coming in, beating up the priests.
Your church is illegal now.
By the law, they're moving it to make it illegal totally, to ban it, even though it has a more than 1,000-year history. 1,000-year, it's older than the United States, more than 10 times. So this is, I'm talking about this process. They're trying to, even if the war stops. That's why I'm calling out for all these groups, intel groups, to leave. They're influencing to make it a religious war between Russia and Ukraine in the future, to put this problem in between churches. Basically, this new OCE church formed by Philip Ricker, who was Pompeo's right-hand man in the State Department, because he goes to the Constantinople church, and they basically made this plan to form this. It was formed under Hillary, then he made it possible during the Trump administration under Pompeo, which basically went against Trump, and he's basically now Trump's enemy. I hope, because Pompeo should not be trusted. And basically, right now, they formed this fake church, made it political, moving it closer to the Western standards, even though there was no official religious process to make this happen. It was a fake process, which was done under Poroshenko, and now Zelensky is making it more radical, destroying the holiday of the 7th of January, where most of the Christian Orthodox, more than 11 million Ukrainian Christian Orthodox, celebrate Christmas on the 7th of January, which now not even a holiday in Ukraine. And they made it on the 25th. Yeah, they basically made it a work day. Even not a possibility for anybody who wants to celebrate it, they cannot. So people would had to have gather on the 25th. Yeah, so it's basically, they're pushing it so hard, it's so politicized, to make this OCE church more powerful and to take over control all these. Yeah, take it all the churches, make it the official religion of Ukraine, even though it's not. Those churches are now being taken over by the OCU, are being used as concert halls. By our religion, Orthodox religion, you cannot have a concert in the church. It's against our values, Christian values. But they are basically putting concerts right now and culinary shows, making food within the church. And I've been talking about this on Twitter a lot. And it's just crazy what they're doing. Basically, they're going against not only
your church.
Yes, and our religion. And this religion has been in Ukraine for more than 1,000 years. And they're trying to take it over and destroy it and make it more pro-Western and take over the churches. So they will be controlled by the so-called Western Church, OCU, which has been formed illegally and falsely by the State Department and Philip Ricker. So there are names to this, and there are strings attached right to the American.
What do you
That
think?
is crazy, Andy.
So
I had no idea that they like took away January 7th from officially. That's crazy. I mean, Ted, I think we got to run because we both have doctor's appointments. So
all right, very quickly,
and
60 seconds, Andy. Can you just answer me? Are you optimistic at all about Trump coming in? Do you think anything will change for the better or worse, or what do you think will happen?
There is hope with the new administration coming to Washington. Hope that there's going to be peace. I do believe that it can be changed. That Trump is not a deep state candidate, and if he surrounds himself with people like Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, will be a more prosperous America and a prosperous world for everybody. I think that's what I hope, and I will be praying for President Trump to make the right decisions in this, because today we also are responsible. Washington is responsible for Ukraine, and Washington has to stop this war.
Same thing. Well said, Andy. I mean, you always outline everything that's happening back in your motherland more succinctly than anybody could, and you know, the fact that you're put on a kill list because of your opinions, your dissent, I would say, on Zelensky is just this is what the new democracy looks like, right, guys?
And falsely sanctioned in America. And falsely sanctioned in America for talking about
that's true.
The truth.
Same thing for dissenting. You are also sanctioned by the Biden government and can't have a normal life right now because of the sanctions from the United States. So, you know, but again, this is what democracy looks like, Andy. You should sacrifice for democracy.
We will build our own future, and hopefully it will be peaceful for everybody, and everybody should be prosperous. And I hope everybody will be prosperous in the new year, and we will have peace with God's help.
Thank you, Andy. Of course, Andrei Telizhenko is a former Ukrainian diplomat and a whistleblower, and a very brave soul. I wish you a happy new year, Andy, and a Merry Christmas on January 7th, on official Orthodox Christmas, because I know a lot of Orthodox people, and they will never accept December 25th as Christmas, no matter how Western they are. It's the whole week of January, as far as I'm concerned. My Orthodox friends, they'll never accept that. So
it's on the lunar calendar, right? So it's different every year, right?
No, it's on the 7th every year. Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay, all right.
It's the Easter that changes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
I don't understand the lunar calendar at all. Okay, so
I always remember with my Eastern Orthodox friends that like New Year's week, they always took the Gregorian New Year. That week is always off. They were gone, and I would go, why do you get the whole week off for New Year's? Oh, you're Orthodox Christian. Okay, so it's your Christmas. Okay, so that made a lot more sense to me. So hopefully you guys get your holiday back, and I hope this year that your life can return to normal. Or this coming year, 2025, that you get to return to normal life, and you can see your friends and family back home. Andrei, thank you so much, as always, for your time. We'll speak to you again very soon. We're going to pray for you that you get your life back. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you very much, Manila, Ted. I appreciate it. All the best. God bless.
Likewise. Take care, Andrei.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Happy New Year. So there we have it. We got to get out of here. I got a tooth to fix. Ted's got a wrist to fix. So thank you guys for joining. Thank you, PutinBot Gaming, for your continued support, moderating the chat and all that stuff. Of course, PutinBot is producer Robbie. Thank you so much. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, and we'll be back again tomorrow.
We're back tomorrow, even though it's New Year's Eve.
New Year's Eve.
And we will be taking Wednesday, January 1st off. We'll probably do a rerun show. Robbie will put that up. And we'll be back on Thursday, January 2nd. So see you tomorrow.
Yeah, see you guys tomorrow, New Year's Eve. Thank you for being here. Have a great day. Hasta mañana, everybody. Adios, amigos.
Bye. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.